Nintendo has a reputation of having some of the most iconic video game heroes of all time across all of their different series. They gave us the likes of Mario, Link, Donkey Kong, and Star Fox. But all these protagonists do have something really in common that doesn't really make them stand out that much. Can you see what it is? They all have dicks. Metroid is one of the oldest and most iconic franchises, even though it feels like not a lot of people have played any of the games. Metroid had its first title back in 1986 on the NES in a game surprisingly called Metroid. The game has you play as Samus Aran to collect alien Metroid organisms that were stolen by space pirates. The game takes place in one large overworld, which requires a lot of retracing your steps after getting certain abilities, and is one of the best 2D adventure games of all time. And the game became even more iconic because if you managed to beat it quickly enough, it revealed that Samus is actually a woman. This was unheard of at the time for a complete badass protagonist to be a woman instead of a fat plumber or elf boy. Everyone remembers the first time they learned Samus was a woman, especially if you got the best ending and saw her in her bikini. Man, I could disappoint her so hard. Metroid jumped to the Super Nintendo where the developers basically just slapped Super on the front of the title and said, "Good enough." Samus returns to Zebes, where she basically just does the same f***ing thing as the first game, but just better. Honestly, that's all Super Metroid is. A better version of the first game with an amazing escape sequence at the end. It's still heralded as one of the greatest games of all time, and for good reason. The Nintendo 64 era came about, and Nintendo gave us an amazing game for every major franchise, except Metroid. Damn, we missed out on some pointy polygonal boobs. The GameCube then came around and gave us what I believe to be the greatest Metroid games of all time. Metroid Prime was the absolute perfect way to experience a Metroid adventure and set the standard moving forward. It again was pretty damn similar to the original game, but instead in a first-person perspective with much better graphics and gameplay. It gives you all of your power-ups right at the beginning and it feels amazing, but then it strips you of all of your abilities and the rest of the game is spent exploring and regaining all the abilities that you lost. I love this game and I might make a video on it someday, so I don't want to say too much about it. But just know, every Metroid game should strive to be as incredible as this one. They even continued the story into a trilogy with Metroid Prime 2 and 3, which are arguably just as fun as the first. And because the third game was released on the Wii, it took advantage of everyone's favorite gimmick, motion controls. Controlling Samus and her gun with the motion controls feels just so perfect, and it gives so much more control over aiming than the C-stick and control stick on the GameCube. Nintendo themselves even realized how perfect it was and re-released the first two games in a trilogy pack on the Wii so that all the games could be played like that. These games had Metroid on the come up and everyone was so excited to see where the franchise would go from here. The hype was real following these games and we still see how much everyone loved this trilogy with how excited everyone was for the reveal of Metroid Prime 4 back in 2017. But that excitement is only so high because everyone just wants to go back to the golden days after the atrocities we've experienced over these past 10 years. And this dark age of Metroid started with a single game that still lives in infamy to this day. Today, we're taking a look at Metroid Other M. Metroid Other M was released on August 31st, 2010 and was the rare occasion of a game first being released in North America, although it was quickly followed by a release in Japan just 2 days later. The game is the 11th Metroid game and was first announced at E3 2009 as a collaboration between Team Ninja and Nintendo. The game takes place between the events of Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion and begins with Samus having a dream of the climax of Super Metroid, showing her defeat Mother Brain and watching the baby die. Pretty dark when you really think about it. Samus departs for space until she picks up a distress signal which she follows until she runs into the Galactic Federation's 7th Platoon. She meets some old friends from her time in the Federation Army, including Adam Malkovich, her former commanding officer, but they refuse to tell her why their platoon is on the station because she's, quote, an outsider. Okay, are you f***ing kidding me? You literally know who she is and how powerful she is. She's probably stronger than your whole goddamn platoon. But whatever, I'll let it slide. That's not even close to the dumbest thing in this game. Samus follows the platoon until they find the corpse of a scientist and are ambushed by a bunch of purple alien insects called the Brugmass. After it's defeated, Adam decides to let Samus help them as long as she follows his orders. Adam, has Samus ever struck you as the person to strictly follow anyone's orders? I'm sure this will go smoothly. But finally, you get to explore the facility and the real game begins. Now, even though Other M was the game that came out directly following the Prime trilogy, the gameplay is vastly different, utilizing the third-person perspective instead of a first-person. I don't know why you would change away from the best idea you ever had, especially on the Wii, which was just perfect for a first-person shooting Metroid game, but with all the dumb decisions Nintendo has made over the years, I really shouldn't be surprised. The game instead has you hold the Wii Remote sideways to more closely resemble a classic NES controller. But how many times do I have to say this? The Wii Remote is not a good controller to use sideways. The whole point of the controller was to take advantage of motion controls, so why are you stripping all of that away? But I do have to throw in this little caveat because Metroid Other M does take advantage of motion controls at least a little bit. If you point the Wii Remote at the screen, the game transitions into a first-person perspective which allows you to examine things similarly to scanning things in the Prime games. But it's heavily watered down because it will straight up just tell you what you need to get past something instead of you needing to figure it out on your own. That kind of takes away all the fun of figuring out the puzzles, Team Ninja. Maybe you should have thought about that, you dumbasses. You also can point and shoot while in first person, which might make you think, doesn't that mean you could just play this whole game like Prime? Nope, the developer said f you and didn't allow for any nunchuck support, so you can't even move when you're in first person. They just love to give us a glimpse of greatness just to throw it in the trash and laugh at us. But hey, at least they gave us something. And it is sort of a good idea to allow you to examine objects to give a more detailed look at things because you really can't get a lot of detail from the third person view. Plus, you can switch to first person mid-jump, which allows you to perform some amazing combos. But those are the only good things I will say about this bullshit. But again, that's not the dumbest part of this game. Don't worry, we're getting there. Just give me a little bit more time. Other M is much more story focused than most Metroid titles, which usually are just explore and shoot aliens. I have always been a big proponent of saying that a good story is what makes a game amazing for me. Of course, I do enjoy games that are just run around and shoot things. I mean, I made an entire video on Star Wars Rogue Squadron and I love that game. But good stories and characters make me feel more connected and motivated to complete the journey. But even with all of that said, the story might just make the experience worse in Other M's case. First off, there are cutscenes, which isn't a big issue except for the fact that some of them are ridiculously long and there's not even the option to skip any of them. Sure, you can skip them if you've already beaten the game, but then why are you playing this game again? You know it's bad. There was also one thing that I see as both a positive and a negative, and that's the addition of voice acting. The Prime trilogy just had Samus make some grunts and noises like that, but Other M has fully fleshed out dialogue between characters. So I like that they tried to make the characters real people like this, but I'll just come out and say it, the voice acting is just god-awful. It feels like every character either shows no emotion while they're speaking, or they're over the top and just makes it completely unbelievable. I just hope that if they do try voice acting again in Metroid Prime 4, that they know what they are doing. But still, even with bad voice acting, the story could still be good, right? Well, my kind sir or madam, let me introduce you to the Ridley scene. This is the one scene in the game that everyone can agree makes no fucking sense. Samus encounters Ridley again, but starts to have PTSD when she sees Ridley. When has Samus ever seemed scared or freaked out by seeing Ridley before? It would make sense that she could have PTSD since Ridley did kill her parents, but that has never been shown before this. She's always been calm, cool, and collected while fighting Ridley before, but now she can't even stand to fight? Chronologically, this is the 7th time that she has encountered Ridley. 7 times, and now she's too scared to fight him? I get that they are trying to make Samus seem more human because anyone can have PTSD, but Samus is one of the strongest and most well-collected fighters from any video game. She would just see Ridley and think, oh, I guess I have to whoop your ass again, not cower and feel like a damsel in distress. And this is something that's a problem with the whole game. The way Samus is depicted is nothing like how she acts in any other game. She has always been strong and independent, but in Other M she constantly doubts herself and willingly follows Adam's order with no pushback at all. She even says at one point that taking orders is exhilarating when in the opening for Metroid Fusion, the game immediately following this one, she literally says she is not fond of taking orders. Nothing from this game lines up with any of the other Metroid games. Samus was one of the first strong female video game protagonists and showed young girls and women how powerful they could really be. But Other M just tore that to shreds and make her take orders from a guy named Adam. That's just disgraceful. And speaking of taking orders from Adam, it is finally time to talk about the stupidest and most ridiculous part of this entire game. What are the two major aspects you think of when you think of Metroid? Probably exploration and all the abilities you obtain. And what if I were to tell you that Other M managed to ruin both of those? Adam tells Samus that she needs to restrict her abilities and only use the ones that he approves of her using at the time. And Samus willingly agrees. What in the flying kind of bullshit reason is that for not having certain abilities? Samus would never, and I mean never, agree to restricting her own abilities in a hostile environment like this. This was just their stupid way of giving you upgrades because they couldn't think of anything else. Even though they literally could have just said that her suit was broken and you needed to collect items to fix it. That would kind of be copying Prime, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Except in this case, your suit would be broken and you would need to fix it, but you know what I mean. The entire authorization system for your suit makes the game way too linear and doesn't let you do anything at any time. The abilities are set in a specific order that Samus is authorized to use them, so the game has a set order that you need to complete all the missions in as well. I feel like like I just keep going back to Prime for comparisons, but it was such a good game and it came out right before this. That game did it perfectly. You got to be Samus with all her abilities right at the beginning, but then you lose them and need to explore to get them all back. In Other M, you have all of your abilities at all time, but you just don't use them because Adam says so. Fuck you, Adam. Also, he restricts non-offensive abilities like the grapple beam and Varia suit for literally no reason. He even sends you on a damn mission through multiple superheated rooms. What is the point of not letting us avoid heat damage? To make it more difficult? That's a stupid ass reason, and if that was their intention, I'm gonna be even more upset. Adam is literally the worst character in any Metroid game, and honestly, I just can't stand him. He acts like a tough guy, but would get absolutely destroyed if Samus didn't restrict herself, but I already ranted about that. He just makes zero sense with anything that he does. Like near the end of the game, when you finally enter Sector 0, Samus sees a baby Metroid which he is about to kill when out of nowhere, Adam attacks her from behind. This could have been a really cool twist where it turns out he's evil and wants to harness the power of the Metroids, but no. He immediately just kills the Metroid like Samus was already gonna do. What the fuck was the point of attacking Samus? Nothing in this game makes any goddamn sense. Metroid Other M had the chance to be one of the greatest Metroid games of all time, coming off the success of the Metroid Prime trilogy. But instead, the developers decided to take everything good from those games and the rest of the series and just throw it out the fucking window. Making the game in a third-person perspective wasn't a terrible idea, as it had worked before. But on a system that had already proved first-person Metroid could be amazing, that was the first sign that this game was not going to be very good. They tried to make a coherent story, but instead made the most confusing story that isn't even closely related to any other Metroid game. And making Samus literally the polar opposite of how she acts in every other title will always just baffle me. Samus is not meant to be afraid of anything, yet she's scared of Ridley? I mean, I would be scared because I'm a pansy, but Samus is like the toughest bounty hunter ever. And then Adam. Oh, does he grind my gears. Everything he does is just stupid and ridiculous. This game was just such a huge disappointment, and I just wish I could erase it from my memory. Especially Adam. God, I can't stand him. But hey, at least I have a fun fact about him. Did you know that Adam Malkovich's name backwards is Hikivaklam Mata? Which makes no fucking sense, just like the rest of this game.